Hey, welcome everybody. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic, incident response, but more specifically, what actually happens during an incident. So my name's Paul Horn. I'm the founder and CEO here at H2 Cyber, and let's go ahead and start and we'll review what actually happens during an incident. So the very first thing that's going to occur is the hacker is going to send an email to either yourself or one of the other employees in your organization. No different than what you see here on the screen. Now, in this case, your emails probably looks very similar. There's no coaching that's going on to tell the individual user, hey, this is actually a bad email. You might even have it marked externally, but that's simply not enough, as most email is coming from an external source. Also notice in the top right-hand corner, we have a little dollar indicator. We're going to be adding up the cost of incident response as we proceed throughout today's webinar. So once the hacker sends an email to the employee is likely going to open it and take some action. In this case, we have Kenneth, and Kenneth has been with the company over 20 years. So he has 20 years worth of email that's still readily available in his mailbox. These things could be like PII, customer information, client information, all those different types of things. But at this point, now that the employee took some action, the password is now in the hands of the hacker. And the next thing that happens is the hacker gets access to ultimately the mailbox. Now, when they do that, at this point, with the mailbox being compromised, there can be a full sync that can occur. And we'll explain that here in a second, but just keep that in mind. So we had the hacker send the email to us, the employee got it, took some type of action, and now the hacker has gained access to the mailbox. Before we move forward, if your organization uses Microsoft or Office 365 from an email standpoint, not the Outlook app, I'm talking about actually using Microsoft 365 as your email service, we highly recommend that you have your IT team check to see if logging's enabled, because by default it is not. And this is extremely important going forward, at least from an incident standpoint, because when you're looking and dealing with logs, whether they're interactive or non-interactive inside the Microsoft ecosystem, if there's something that's actually in the logs that indicates BAV2 ROPC, that's what indicates that a potential full mailbox sync could exist. And you'll never have access to the hacker's computer to determine if the sync occurred or it didn't occur. You actually have to prove that it didn't, and you will never be able to. So therefore, you have to assume the bad person actually has all the mail. So in that 20-year scenario, they would have 20 years worth of mail and all the detail within it, attachments and so forth. Now, if you're using a Microsoft product, the Microsoft 365 product, there's all kinds of different flavors of ice cream in terms of licenses. But from our standpoint, you should look to at least go move to Business Premium E3 or E5. If you're on Business Standard or something along those lines, we encourage you to move upward because you don't get a lot of security functionality with those other ones. Business Premium, E3 and E5 are really what you want to look at. So now, at some point, we're going to probably receive a call asking, hey, why did you send me this email that has this shared document link? And that's when we're going to realize that our email is compromised. At this point, the potential breach notification timers could also begin. And in most cases, this is an incident that you'll likely have to report if you're in a regulated environment, such as financial services, if you're licensed with New York DFS or FINRA, the SEC, any of the state insurance commissioners. Just know your regulatory ecosystem, and this is generally likely something you have to report. But I want you to understand that simply resetting your password is not enough, because you must prove nothing happened to this point. And it's going to be very hard for you not to prove something. So why isn't simply resetting the password good enough for us? Well, the bad person has access to our mail and all the downloaded mail. And at that point, simply resetting the password isn't going to kick them out. They're still going to have it. They could have set up mailbox rules to continue forwarding information, but now they can launch attacks on your customers, You don't know what data they have and how they're going to use it. Standing up fraudulent domains that could act like you and just have one or two letters off in your domain to start attacking your people. So simply resetting your password is not enough in this scenario. So what do you do if you don't have cyber insurance? Well, first, we highly recommend that you reach out to P&G Cyber. They have a prepackaged kit for business email compromise that starts at around $7,500. It'll get you the initial due diligence and the report and whatnot. You can reach out to them at www.png-cyber.com. Do not be fooled. Your IT team is not trained nor certified in incident response. This is a completely different activity. This is like going to your family practitioner and asking them to do some type of advanced surgery on you. They're not equipped to do that. Neither is your IT team. So what if you also don't have insurance, but you actually would like to get insurance? So at X2 Cyber, we can actually help you get insurance and put the minimum things in place. But you are going to need to have certain things in place in order to submit your application. And you want that application to be in good order the first time, because in some cases, if you put it in and it doesn't meet the requirements, even once you put them in place and you go back, they might still decline you and deem you uninsurable. But we highly recommend you reach out to Lillian Morvay. She's an insurance broker. She's does a lot in the financial services space, but no matter what type of business you're in, she can help you get the right coverages you need for your business. You can visit her at ibdcconsulting.com. And for those of you out there that are in some type of an affiliation or partnership or whatever, don't be fooled thinking that you're covered by the upstream policy or their policy. In most cases, you're not. You're your own company and everything. So in most cases, you're not covered. You would need your own separate policy. So now, you have a decision to make once you realize that, hey, my mailbox was compromised. You're either going to leverage your cyber insurance policy or you're not. And in this scenario, as we proceed forward, we're going to use the scenario that we did engage our cyber insurance. But we're going to tally up the number to kind of give you an idea how much this actually costs in terms of money if an incident happened. Because in most cases, organizations that do get breached, they go out of business very quickly because of the true number behind this if they don't have insurance. So the very first thing that when you engage your cyber insurance, you're going to put them on notification and they're going to assign you a team. The very first thing they're going to do is assign you a privacy lawyer and then a forensics team that they have on their list. So if you try to go get some other forensics company, they're likely not going to use those. They're going to want to use their own trusted people. And for this example, we're going to assume that we have $1 million coverage for our policy. Now, I know they're first and third term limits, but we're just going to focus on the higher number just to keep it easy for tracking purposes. So once they assign your legal counsel, that total bill from the legal counsel might be $50,000. So as you can see in the top right, we have $50,000 there. So we're just going to keep a running tally. Also note, when you do notify your cyber insurance carrier that an incident happened, it might take a day or two for them to reach back out to you, because you'll initially report it, they'll take some information from you, and then likely the forensics team will reach out to you, and then the privacy lawyer will reach out to you. That could take a day or two, so just be cautious. That's actually fairly normal. Now, once forensics has been engaged, we're really going to start understanding the totality of what the compromise looks like. So we brought the forensics team in. Now they've gone through, did an assessment, and they really now determined that it wasn't just Kenneth, but Krista and Leroy are also impacted. Again, Kenneth has been here for 20 years, Krista 7, and Leroy for 13. So only three of the 27 employees in our scenario are impacted. Now, the forensics firm is probably going to do a organizational-wide password reset, which is very normal. Let's just say that's $25,000. Now we're up to $75,000 in total. Well, the next course of action that takes place is the forensics company will do an AI-based file scan for all sensitive information across those 3 mailboxes. Well, because there is no archiving in place and everybody has a fair amount of emails in their mailbox that's readily available in scope, that effort could cost another $30,000. So now we're up to $105,000. Now, limiting an email availability in email can significantly reduce an incident. So that's definitely an action item to take away. And we'll cover that farther along in the webinar. But for this scenario, the 3 mailboxes, we did the initial AI-based scan, and we found 580,000 files discovered during this scan. And that's a very accurate number when dealing with this. The scenario that we've taken here is actually based off of really a real scenario. So once we did the initial sweep and we found those initial amount of files that were in scope, now we need to reduce it based off of the information types like social security numbers, bank accounts, names, email addresses, all that sensitive type of information. Well, that might be another $15,000. So now we're up to $120,000 in total. But we reduced the number of in-scope files down to 250,000 files. So that's a good significant reduction in terms of files. Well, the very next thing that needs to happen is somebody actually has to go through and do a manual review of all 250,000 files that are left in scope. And that can either be done in 2 ways. It can either be done onshore or offshore. Now, in most cases, you're likely not going to have somebody offshore do it because of the information that's involved. But note that the cost for onshore resources to do that is significantly higher. So in most cases, offshore is going to run you $1.90 per file. Onshore is going to run you around $2.70 a file. And this is a significant undertaking that's going to be conducted outside of the business by either of those 2 resources. So we're going to use the onshore example. So that effort alone is probably going to run $675,000. So now we have $795,000 in this incident at the moment. Well, once the onshore people go through and do the manual review, they turn those results over to the business. And the business needs to go through them to review each file for accuracy. So you're going to actually be going through every one of these XLS documents, PDF documents, Word documents, and looking for all the information that's actually in play. Who owns the information? Is this us, a business partner? All those different things. Does a current business or does a current address exist? And depending on how many resources you throw at that, let's just say that's another $50,000 worth of internal burn, and now we're up to $845,000. This is a massive undertaking. You're going to be pulling people away from normal activities, their normal daily activities. And keep in mind here that failure to identify the current address on some of these, customers, and that might be customers from 20 years ago or not even your customers at all anymore, but you have their information and it's been impacted. If you don't have a current address for some of these people, you will likely need to perform a substitute disclosure. Let me tell you what a substitute disclosure is. You can either do it in one of 2 ways. Most states will accept this. Is you can either notify your local news outlets of the breach occurring, and they'll probably run it on the news, or you have to post something on your website that says you had an incident, and it can't be something that's tiny down at the bottom. It's got to be prominent. It's got to be well displayed and things like that. But it's got to sit there for 90 days. And that could be detrimental to you as people come across and try to seek your organization for new business. The next thing that happens is notifications are going to be sent to all the impacted parties. This also could include your partners and regulators and whatnot, because you probably have contractual obligations to notify certain people when things do happen. You'll also be required to provide credit monitoring to these folks. That's normally about $9 each for everybody that enrolls. Now, in this case, we have 57,000 unique individuals impacted. Well, the total number of that could be 513,000 at $9 each, but in most cases, not that many people are actually going to register because they already have other enrollments with everybody. But in theory, they could all do it. So we're going to use the 513 number. Now we're up to 1.35 million. And again, that substitute disclosure of that notification be on your website for 90 days. Well, now we have to deal with the aftermath of the incident. And that could be criminal or civil lawsuits. You might lose business from existing customers or partners. They might drop you. People going to your competitor. If you're in a financial services space, they can take their book of business elsewhere. You're likely going to receive a high influx of calls, inbound calls, to your staff in operations and whatnot, talking about the incident because word of mouth spreads very fast. And then once that occurs, in most cases, you're going to likely brace for some type of cyber examination if you're in a regulated environment. Again, we're using financial services as an example. We have FINRA, New York DFS, the SEC, Department of Labor. Expect some type of fine. Privacy fines are different than other fines because in most cases, privacy fines are based off of the number of records. So let's just say I have a life insurance policy and I update it and you have it 3 or 4 times. Well, it just doesn't count because I'm there one time. It's the actual number of records and documents that you have of mine. And if you don't have a current risk assessment, that's probably going to be the first thing that a regulatory body asks for you. So if you don't have a current cyber risk assessment, you're already going to be starting off on the wrong foot. So you definitely want to get that taken care of as soon as possible. Now, once that effort is done, and likely you're going to have to, fund and prioritize different cybersecurity investments. You'll likely have to address whatever arose during the incident or, as a result of the incident in a timely manner. If you're using a Microsoft Office or if you're using the Microsoft ecosystem, we highly encourage you to, get some type of monitoring service for the Microsoft ecosystem because the Microsoft ecosystem has not only the mail, but it also has the Azure side. And those solutions are very inexpensive. Normally you can get those done for like under $200 a person per year. You could also put in some behavioral coaching, like I'd mentioned initially, that could have probably prevented this from the get-go for less than $100 a year. That's actually going to pop different banners and contextual awareness to say, hey, this is very bad. I wouldn't click on this to make your users, to allow them to make a more informed decision. So at the moment, we're still at the $1.35 million for this incident. And again, this only impacted 3 mailboxes. 3 mailboxes. We have $1 million in coverage. So at the moment, we're $350,000 over. So what other recommendations could you do to help maybe prevent against an incident from occurring? Because in most cases, mail's likely going to be the first place in for most people in a breach. They're likely going to come in from an email standpoint. So definitely obtain an external cybersecurity risk assessment. That'll give you some ideas of what things that you're missing and don't have in place today. If you don't have those reasonable time periods identified to limit the email in your mailboxes, highly encourage you to do that because that could have significantly reduced the scope of what we had to deal with initially if we did those. And you could put those old mails behind a portal that you could go and log into that portal and get them there. It's just they wouldn't show up in your mailbox. Definitely purchase cyber and fraud insurance. There is a difference between cyber and fraud insurance. In most cases, wire transfers, money movements, that kind of stuff, that's actually in the fraud policy, not a cyber policy. Leverage endpoint detection and response, enable multi-factor authentication, and disable legacy authentication. So it's very important when you enable multi-factor authentication that you do the disable legacy authentication, because if you don't, you can still log in without multi-factor because those other authentication types don't accept the multi-factor, so they'll never prompt for multi-factor. Now, the 2 things that are in red are critical items in order to obtain cyber insurance. Those are generally must-have items. If you do not have them in place, you will likely be turned down from actually and deemed uncoverable. So if you're not sure where to start, we have a SaaS-based tool that identifies the top 77 things for you and your organization to do, spread out over 7 phases. The incident that we just covered, that is contained within several of those 77 controls. Please visit us at www.h2cyber.com. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar.